Welcome, beautiful souls. My name is Anka, and today I want to bring you this topic of prayer up for discussion. Prayer as in collaboration, prayer as in a two-way conversation, in a setting of this recognition of the all. A few days ago, I had a hypnosis done with a few of my friends. And in this state, I realized that this is what prayer is. But of course, in that state, it was this exploration between the human part, the 3D part of the body. So not necessarily the human as the whole, but it's the body and the 3D perspective of the humanness in collaboration with the soul, which later really translated into prayer. So it was an interesting observation that I had, and definitely is something that it's worth discussing with you. What I don't want this discussion to be is me telling you that you're praying wrong, and I had this experience and I'm going to tell you the right way to pray. Not at all. This is, especially prayer. Prayer is such a personal, and I'm going to say intimate experience that everybody has. So this topic on prayer today is truly an inspiration. See what really resonates with you, see what really inspires you, and see how you can bring that into your practice for your own expansion of this collaboration that you have with spirit. And before I even go into that part of the video, I want to kind of go through these two fundamentals that to me are now imperative that we lay down. And it's funny, I'm using the word imperative. 5 years ago, they weren't so imperative at all. But I've been really working with these concepts as a foundation, as a clarity, as an alignment. And it's not just for prayer, but really any ceremony. These are great two things. So not too crazy. It's rather simple, but again, it brings that foundation and that clarity in. So number one, whom are you praying? And even if you're praying to spirit, try to pick, I guess, or what is your targeted frequency within spirit that you're talking to? And why this is important, this also is related to a different hypnosis session that I've done, in which I had two very specific and very targeted questions about my job at the time. And of course, when you're in hypnosis and you're watching all these past lives and you're in a much higher perspective, in a much higher frequency, and then I brought up these questions to be answered, and all of a sudden they felt very puny, very insignificant, right? Because they were targeting a very specific, maybe months of my life, but now my life was over lifetimes. So these questions almost didn't even register. And I remember even asking the therapist to just kind of ignore those. Let's skip all the work questions, because in that state it was like, let's keep going about the purpose, the larger work, and who cares, what's going on at work. So when we have specific things that we take it to God, right? We take it to source. Sometimes that's not that great of a match, right? That's what I mean is like, see who you want to target. Maybe questions that are very specific like that. Maybe your guides are a better fit for that type of clarity, right? Because, of course, so we have our guides, and the guides can have different levels, right? We always have multiple guides, but some of them specialize, or they have a closer alliance, understanding to this type of frequency in which we reside, and could entertain and bring you a more practical answer, right? Because if you're asking God, when when you're in prayer and you're addressing God questions, they have to somehow relate to love, right? So if you're asking something like, how does the situation at work bring me closer to love, or give me this loving wisdom from a very high um, perspective to bring into a practical situation at work, but then God answer is always so high in wisdom that you have to bring that translation into that practicality yourself, right? If you're asking a guide that it's closer to this realm that you exist, maybe that practicality has been already translated to a more readily available answer, and it makes more sense to you, or you don't have to spend so much time translating that. So that's what I mean by pick pick the frequency that you are addressing in the prayer, right? So besides our guides, of course, we have our ancestors, and then we have the angelic realm, and even above that, right? And then source. So there's all these layers that they will all entertain and bring you an answer, even if it's not today. They'll show up through synchronicities, or through symbols or coins, or on the ground, or you can specify, right? Like, give me an omen, and it will show up, but it's always in the translation, right? I hope that makes sense. So now that we cover number one, right, which is, whom am I addressing? Number two is, who am I? And it's really very similar to calling somebody. You're picking up the phone, you're dialing a specific number, and that specific person calls a specific person within you, right? So if you're calling your childhood bestie, you're going to be that other friend. If you're calling your employer, HR, you're going to be the employee, right? So it's very similar. The only one thing with who are you, it sort of serves kind of this mental checklist to make sure we're not creating a whole separate piece of us that is completely alienated from the whole, especially when life has us on our knees, because even if we are a strong, resourceful person, there are situations that life sometimes creates that really brings us down to our knees, and we're like, okay, I've done everything I knew. I'm exhausted. I'm here. Show me. I'm surrendering, right? There are kind of two types of situations. When we come like that and we are, let's just say, this victim, we create a separateness, right? Because we are very far away from source. We are so hopeless that, and it's almost like we forget that it's still within us to overcome certain realization. A lot of times it's just these limiting beliefs that are playing tricks in our mind. And we can easily create a bubble of separateness from the wholeness, in which case we really just expect a savior, something, someone to just come and resolve our situation. That is not empowerment. That is not what spirit wants us to do. This is not a game where, between spirit and ego, each of them trying to show the other one which one is more clever. No, it's not a game like that. No one wants to see you defeated on the floor. And yet, there are these situations where life puts you there, right? As long as we remember that, no, we are part of the wholeness, and I'm just right now in a temporary hold of confusion, I'm still asking for the same help. I'm still surrendering, maybe with exactly the same emotion, but I'm approaching the whole situation from a different perspective. And that is night and day difference of who we are when we come to prayer, right? So one is still an empowered being asking on their knees because they don't have any more inspiration how to solve a situation, and the other one is a full victim mentality that has to really overcome these limitations, right? The barrier on their eyes has to be set free, and it's huge. So the one will allow answers to come through because they still believe they're part of the whole, and the victim mentality, that bubble, won't allow that prayer to come through. So different scenarios, 100%, even though from the outside they look the same. So very important to go through that checklist and check yourself. It's the same situation, I'm hurting, but really, who am I? And maybe there are situations where you want to bring it in even to a finer definition, because if the body needs help, maybe you want to come as, I am the body, I'm speaking on behalf of the body. Or today, I know I'm soul, but somehow I feel very restrained. So really, I'm the human, I'm the very basic human, right? And other times we're right here and we pray in a way different way. So define who you are. And that definition already kind of brings you into, who do you need to speak with? Do you need to speak with the guides first? Do you need to speak with angels, or no? Today you want to be with source. And that's the difference. I think when you are, or when you have the desire to be with source or with God, it's almost not a prayer, right? It's, you have nothing to ask, because it's almost like you can't even bring something small and finite to God. Not that, again, not that God wouldn't answer, but the answer might be too wide for you to have it be practical. So when you go to God, you just want to spend and share the time with God. When I do energy work, and that's different than prayer, or at least the way I define it in my mind, right? So let's just define prayer when you go to have this conversation, when you go with the ask, when you go with the intent. When I do energy work, it's different than prayer, but that is definitely being with God, right? Even though you're doing work, there is an exchange, but you're more, it's like there's no asking. It's interesting. It's different. Anyway, so a couple things to think about even as you approach prayer. But foundationally, that is huge, because that's what we're building on with this second half of the discussion. So let's move into the second part of the conversation, which is this experience of prayer as a collaboration. And in this experience that I had during hypnosis, it was all about the interaction between the soul and the human aspect of ourselves, right? The intricacy between the body and the awareness of the soul. It's that integrative mechanism. And the prayer part was almost this mechanism of how conversation happens. Because when we come into prayer, we open ourselves up, right? There is a recognition, because we're moving into an action, right? Even if we're not necessarily consciously going through that thought process, we're still there in the action of prayer. So automatically we are realizing, okay, we are soul, so I don't have to think about it. And we're making a request. There is a desire for that collaboration. So when that door opens, let's just say, there's an invitation for the soul to have access to the database of the body emotional experience, the mental realm experience, all that humanist experience, in a way that the soul doesn't necessarily have access to all the time, right? Because when we are, let's just say, in our normal state, which is beta, beta 2 especially, then the soul is it's kind of cut off, because the realm of frequencies are far and apart, where the soul doesn't have access to in real time. It can observe, but it cannot interact so much with the body, if that makes sense. So there has to be these openings where the humanness opens up to that frequency of that soul connection, which later on in the day after the session, that's when I realized, oh, that's what prayer is. We are praying and we are exchanging experience. And it's sort of like we are collaborating on how this mechanism of integration works. So what I gathered in this experience is that, the soul is continuously trying to integrate more and more. This is the work. This is the work of the light workers going on right now. And so this integration is this constant collaboration between the soul and the humanness, trying to optimize our emotional and our nervous system, because this body does not have the complexity level within the emotional system. It doesn't have the palette. It doesn't have the accuracy and the precision of our emotional body, and also our mental understanding of our emotional system, or the correlation between our feelings and our mental understanding is not quite there. So that complex, let's call it, integrated with our nervous system, creates this control panel from which the soul can fully integrate with and can have an experience that is fully embodied. Right now, prayer is the mechanism that a lot of the optimization between this emotional mental complex is being literally built. This changed my perspective of prayer. Not only how I approach prayer, yes, like who am I, who am I bringing in? And of course, we have the soul, but then we have the soul overlay, all right, the oversoul. And there are so much dimensionality to that oversoul. And on top of our oversoul, there are all these other oversouls and beings that we interact with. So now we have access to such a huge level of interaction. And so when I don't make my life situation here in the 3D about that situation alone, but I bring that situation in this much bigger perspective of who could I possibly be interacting with? Who am I? Am I this body? Yes, today I'm this very human body, but I am aware and I'm opening up to a much wider connection, even though I feel like crap and my emotions are so dense and so low. I'm still making myself available to this much bigger learning experience. And then when my soul and, whoever this team is that is working on this project is interacting with me, now, not only this situation is not personal, but it has such a wider purpose, and my whole life context is so much bigger. And when I'm available to realize that maybe I can accept an upload, a download, maybe I can accept some hardware and software upgrades that I can then realize a much quicker overcoming of a limitation that brought me into a situation into this 3D. And if I can untangle that realization and come into clarity, then my situation will evaporate. And it already happened enough times in my life where I'm seeing how once I overcome certain aspect in my limitations, right? When I'm clear about something, a perception about how this world works, I don't want to say instantly, within days, my situation, which was becoming very complex and kind of, I was starting to lose. I knew that there was payment of the situation of some sort. That situation somehow evaporates, or it dissolves, or um, it solves with very little payment and with very little effort. So now I'm like, wow, this prayer is much, much more complex and much easier than I could possibly have imagined. And it's truly non-effort, right? Because now all it takes is reframing my focus, right? I'm defining who I am in the moment. I'm not lying to me. If I'm feeling crappy, I'm just crappy feeling human, still knowing that I'm soul coming into a soul meeting, available for this collaboration, available for full transparency of my data, allowing my feelings, my emotions to fully flow through and fully experiencing what I am feeling. And then I'm reframing this focus. And not only that, but I can maintain this level of reframing this focused, reframed focus throughout the day to such a degree now that the expression, I'm a walking prayer. Oh my God, totally. Yes. I can now be a walking prayer because now I finally understand what that means to be a walking prayer. It's like, wow. But it's this being fully available for an exchange. And I can ask, I can participate in that. I can ask for optimizations for my body, for my perception, for my instrument, so that my soul can integrate more and more and more, and it's not here for little periods of time when my body is in a higher vibration. So this was my offer for today. I think it's a pretty huge deal. See how you found it. Leave me a comment. What did you take out of this? Let's collaborate on how this fits with your understanding of prayer and this collaboration between soul and human. This is all of a sudden this beautiful ongoing journey that I'm really looking forward to going deeper with this exploration. So let me know. Thank you so much for your participation into this discussion, even if it's via video. And I'll see you into the next discovery. Thank you.